But first, Michael and Justin were just 17 and 16 years old when their 26-year-old special ed teacher, Catherine Hodeling, started grooming them. They say it started with some extra attention with their schoolwork, but it escalated into off-campus meetings, drinks, drugs, and sexual abuse.
I was a kid that was in school and I needed help, and the predator and the monster kind of took me under her wing. I was a junior in high school when I first met Catherine Hoteling. It became a point where I couldn't run away from her because she was handling all of my classes and credits and everything. She was in control of me graduating. She used to just buy alcohol. We were in her office and she had a Xanax she offered, probably like 3 months in. I needed a ride home, so I had called Mrs. Hoteling. She wanted to pull over to the side of the road and just sit there and listen to music for a little bit. And then she had to say, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And that's when we just had sex. The first person I told was my best friend, Justin. Unfortunately, she did the same thing she did to me to him.
So she would take us to school every day of the week. She would offer both of us a ride home because we both lived next to each other. I left my charger in her car. When she came over, she dropped off my charger. She just started to sit on my lap and then she started kissing on me. She was just pressuring every day, just telling me like, hey, I want to see you, I want to see you, I want to see you. We had sex a total of like 6 times. And I kept telling her no, but she wouldn't let up. Even though she got caught, she still only served 4 years. How do you get out on good behavior for 6 counts of sexual conduct and, drugs to a minor? That doesn't make sense.
So the federal government has opened investigations into 20 school district concerns involving sexual misconduct by adults working in these schools. But the most disturbing part of the whole story is simply that predators may seek positions within these schools in order to get access to your children. Parents already know this sort of evil exists, so that's not necessarily the most surprising part. What is surprising, however, is the deeper concern is what happens after these signs start to appear. So when children approach they go to their schools, they meet with their teachers, and they're being abused in this way. What about the allegations? Are the allegations properly investigated? Are the incidents reported accurately? Are parents even informed once the teacher gets caught? So these are some of the things we're going to look into today to determine if public school systems in their current state, if they can be trusted with your children, right? Because that's important. You're giving your child over to this institution for 10 hours of the day or however many hours. You want to know that it's a trustworthy institution. So we want to talk about that. The United States Department of Education, the Office of Civil Rights, has launched a new national K-12 initiative focused specifically on sexual harassment by adults in positions of authority, aka teachers in the classroom. As part of that initiative, this department opened investigations into 20 school districts whose federal civil rights data raised questions about how staff on student misconduct was being reported and handled. And I'm going to show you a quick clip of how currently in California, what their view of this actually is.
What are the reporting requirements for educators in California if there are credible allegations of sexual molestation or abuse against children?
So it's actually a very low standard. If you reasonably suspect, that's the key term, that a child has been sexually, emotionally, or physically abused as a mandated reporter, you must report. So what that means is if you have enough to say, I got to look into this, you must immediately call law enforcement or child protective services, and within 24 hours make a written report.
And what's the rate of compliance?
It's almost zero.
What do you mean it's almost zero?
In the vast majority of cases we have, what occurs is the mandatory reporting statute is ignored and schools investigate it themselves. And the problem is when institutions or people investigate themselves, my experience is they rarely find themselves guilty. The whole point of the mandatory reporting regime is to have a third party look at it so they can get to the truth. It's a crime, by the way, not to report, and yet almost nobody's been prosecuted for it.
I have here the Child Abuse and Neglect Reporting Act. Is there a requirement for schools to notify parents of credible allegations of sexual molestation or abuse against children by teachers?
No. If a child is a third grader and they go to school and the school removes the teacher because they believe the teacher molested a little boy or a little girl, there is absolutely no legal requirement for schools to notify parents.
How can that be?
Well, I think we have to ask the California legislature and the other legislatures who have allowed this situation to occur. This is designed to conceal the level of abuse by school personnel from parents. Okay, I want to be clear about something. Most teachers are good people and there for the right reasons. In fact, in many of the cases, the reporters who finally stop it are other teachers. But what happens to them, in my experience, when they stand up and say, no, you're not doing this anymore, and reporting, frequently, not always, but frequently, they're retaliated against by the administration and the school district.
This is why transparency matters. And I appreciate the gentleman for explaining that very well, that there's no requirement for schools to report abuse in California, if they can reasonably suspect that children are being abused or molested by their teachers. And if you just think deeply about what that means, one institution may believe it has solved a problem by removing a troublesome employee. So even if they were to remove the employee, if they are currently, as they currently are, not required or held accountable to even doing that, to even removing the troubled teacher who is inflicting this harm on their children, then how much less are there going to be rules and regulations and policies in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again? And so as parents and homeschooling educators, it's a great thing if you homeschool your children. It's a really great time to homeschool. But even if you don't, just being vigilant, being mindful that there are people out there who behave in this way as you're not surprised about. However, what's more surprising is the fact that the discipline or lack of discipline from the administration, the school administration, the school board is so minor, if at all. It makes putting your children in these institutions a frightening exercise. It becomes a frightening exercise because you don't know if your child is next on the hit list. And even if they are you even going to get justice? We have some good news. However, the current presidential administration, Dr. Trump and his cabinet are currently cracking down on sex predators in school. The video I'll show you is a new release. It came out just a few days ago, but it is a new initiative that the president has because he sees, and those who are counseling him see that this is becoming an issue, and that if it's not nipped in the bud, it's going to only blossom into something that we can't control later.
The Trump administration is cracking down on schools accused of protecting sexually abusive teachers. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights launching a national initiative to protect students. According to the department, credible reports of sexual abuse and harassment across the country often go uninvestigated. Sometimes suspected offenders are transferred to new schools or roles in other districts, a practice known as passing the trash. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt pointed to California, saying the state could lose $50 million in federal funding for failing to protect students. The department's Office for Civil Rights has opened 20 investigations into school districts.
So a mother can research a school, meet the principal, tour the classrooms, inspect the curriculum, and speak with teachers and do all the things she should do before, giving her children over to these institutions. But she cannot independently access confidential personnel records. And by that, I mean she cannot determine or come to learn or come to know about the background or the history of these teachers and of this administration and the staff at certain schools. The institution knows more about the parent than the parent knows about the institution and its personnel. What an interesting situation, even though it's the institution that's going to be monitoring their children for the next 10 hours. It's incredible. It is important to say this clearly. An accusation is not the same as proof. I understand that a lot of teachers, potentially, some teachers could be accused of doing wrong or misconduct, and they could be perfectly innocent. And those are not the people we're discussing today. We're discussing the growing concern of sexual abuse within these schools by personnel, by teachers, by staff, and it is absolutely substantiated. And so that's what we're discussing. So due process matters. False accusations can destroy innocent lives, and we don't want to be a part of that. I want to share a quick video of a lady who has something to say about this very topic. Here we go.
Scripture tells us that the truth shall set us free, and it is past the time for this community to be delivered from the darkness and secrecy, protecting predators and symptomatic corruption. My daughter Mackenzie was sexually exploited by the superintendent's husband, Matthew Gay Vetter, right inside one of your schools. And when it happened, his powerful friends and cowardly co-workers at the district wanted to brush it off. They wanted to whisper that it was an accident, because who could possibly believe that the husband of the superintendent could be a child predator? I would tell you who he is. The Bible warns us about wolves in sheep clothing. Who could come prey on the innocent? And you, this board, are just as guilty for turning a deaf ear to these children when they came to you crying for protection. Yes, I said they, because it wasn't just my daughter. You failed Mackenzie, and you have failed so many other innocent children. You promised before God to keep them safe.
Yeah, very heartbreaking testimony. Her daughter, Mackenzie, was taken advantage of by the superintendent's husband. And no one came, no one stood up for her. No one cared. No one said, hey, don't do that. That's wrong. Superintendent, you're fired and your husband needs to go to jail. No one stood up for the child. And so that is the risk we assume when we hand our precious children over to these institutions. And I'm not here to dunk on institutions, but I'm here to dunk on the institutions because I'm not a big fan of institutions. I'm a big fan. There's only one institution I follow. That is the institution of Christ. That is his system, which works always. And he teaches us to love. He teaches us about purity. He teaches us about godliness and righteousness and holiness. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God above all. He teaches these principles that if everyone were on the same page, we would live in harmony and there would be no evil among us. However, not everyone believes and follows that. And so it's a high risk to give your precious child over to groups of people who have no concern, have no regard for your God or his holiness and his requirement for purity. So I wanted to use her testimony just to kind of further, corroborate the stories that we're discussing today and sharing with you. This is not meant to be a fearful video. It's just one to kind of ground us, to help us to see what's happening in the real world. Even if it hasn't happened to us, it happens all the time. It happens all the time. And whenever we come to that realization, we can take these things a bit more seriously. I have one last video I want to show you, and it's going to help to kind of put the icing on the cake here. Here we go.
A teacher from Sydney's southwest has been arrested accused of grooming a student for years. Multiple charges have been laid after the discovery of child abuse material first flagged by AI.
With an early knock at the door, the life of a Sydney high school teacher unravelled. Sex crime detectives arresting 35-year-old Nathaniel Balesta.
It's very confronting and very concerning when I see trusted members of our community, like educators, allegedly involved in offences like this.
He taught at John Edmondson High School in Horningsea Park. Earlier this week, it's alleged AI systems flagged a large amount of child abuse material uploaded to a server linked to Balesta.
Police will also allege we found evidence of communications to a young victim, grooming and procuring a young child for sexual activity. The victim in this matter, at one point, was a student of the accused.
The Education Department saying Balesta has been stood down, unable to work in any school. He hasn't applied for bail.
Is there anything you have to say on your client's behalf?
I haven't had an opportunity to speak to him as yet to get instructions.
Police say the grooming of his former student took place over 4 years. Given how long those messages went on for, police are now looking into Balesta's history at the school and whether any red flags might have been missed. They want to speak with anyone who might have information that can assist investigators.
There may be a likelihood that there's further victims involved.
Andrew Denny, 7 News.
Yeah, the news is usually enough to make a person want to cry, that's for sure. But listen, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So I'm not here to throw stones at anybody. I'm here to clarify that because of our fallen nature and the lack of access people have to the life of God, right? There's a lack of access because they don't want Christ. They don't want you, Jesus. They don't want to read the Bible. They don't want to pray. They don't want to fast. They don't want to seek God. So they're going to be seeking all these other pleasures, lust, greed, immorality. And when people fill themselves up with so much evil, they're going to behave like the devil. You know, we can't be surprised when people behave like the devil because they're children of the devil, because they're not children of God. So I'm not here to cast stones at those guys, because only reason we're not children of the devil is because we have access to God as a consequence of our choice to follow Jesus. However, I do want to say that the children of the devil still like to interact with the children. They like to take on these positions and put themselves in influential places to influence and persuade your children. And so for that reason, we want to be very wise and discerning and protect the little ones that God has put in our care. It is not okay that a single child is ever harmed by anyone through a public institution such as a school. That should never be the case. But in the real world, it happens every day. So for those of you who are wise and discerning, I thank you. I thank you for being careful. I thank you for being prayerful. I thank you for being led by the Spirit. And most importantly, being more and more, positioned to homeschool and educate your own child, because you have what it takes to educate your children. You have what it takes. You may think, oh, I've never taught. I don't know anything. We will help you, right? We will help you educate your child. You have what it takes. We have systems in place to educate children from grade K onwards. So there's no excuse. But you have what it takes. So feel empowered. Know that there are these sexual deviants that exist, but your child does not have to be the next victim. And we should be prayerful, like the 5 wise virgins, since once you get into the place of protection, protecting your child by homeschooling, trusting God, living faithfully before Him, then you can even potentially supply oil to those who are not as wise. Okay. I think the Bible calls them foolish. That's all for today's video. I just wanted to bring this to light. It's not new information, but it is still important information. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Nita with Homeschool Now. But until next time, God bless.